What happens when the child you raised becomes a headline for all the wrong reasons? While your child faces a judge, you're being tried in the court of public opinion. Today, we're looking at why society blames the parents when a child kills, and the new legal precedents that are turning bad parenting into a crime. When a child commits a truly heinous crime, the shadow they cast is long enough to cover their entire family. It's a form of guilt by association. Even if you didn't pull the trigger, society acts like the crime is in your DNA. It's the deep-seated belief that guilt is contagious, that a monstrous act must have been born from a monstrous home. The parents of a young killer often find themselves branded with a modern-day scarlet letter for the whole world to see. Suddenly, friends disappear. People whisper in the grocery store. Your face is splashed across the news right next to your child's, while millions of strangers dissect and condemn every parenting choice you've ever made. You're left grieving the loss of the child you thought you knew, while the world treats you like an accomplice to their worst possible act. This is the crushing reality for parents navigating an impossible landscape of shame, isolation, and public hatred. In 2021, the case of Ethan Crumbley, who carried out a mass shooting at Oxford High School, brought this issue into sharp legal focus. His parents, James and Jennifer Crumbley, were charged with involuntary manslaughter. Prosecutors argued they were grossly negligent. They had bought their son the handgun used in the shooting just days before, and worse, failed to act on glaring warning signs, like a disturbing drawing he made on a school assignment on the very morning of the attack. Then, in 2024, in separate trials, both were found guilty. Their convictions set a stunning new precedent, making them the first parents in America to be held criminally responsible for a mass school shooting committed by their child. While other parents have faced charges for a child's violence before, this case was a landmark. The judge at sentencing said that the convictions weren't about general poor parenting, but about specific, repeated failures to act on things that would make a reasonable person feel the hair on the back of their neck stand up. The verdict sent a message. In certain circumstances, the law will now hold parents directly accountable. But it also amplified the one question society always asks: how could you not know? The verdict sent a message: you should have known. But as we'll see later, some of the most dangerous warning signs look exactly like normal teenage behavior. The Crumbly verdict was a legal first, but the urge to find the origin of evil in a parent's home is nothing new. To see how deep this goes, we have to look back decades to a case that shocked the UK. This public condemnation of parents is nothing new. To understand it, we can look back to England in 1968 and the case of Mary Bell. At just 11 years old, Mary was convicted of the manslaughter of two little boys, Martin Brown and Brian Howe. The crimes were shocking, but as the investigation unfolded, a horrifying picture of Mary's own childhood began to emerge. Mary's mother, Betty Bell, was described as mentally unstable and an alcoholic. The accounts of Mary's life, though some are debated, paint a grim picture of horrific abuse and neglect. There were allegations that her mother, who was involved in sex work, resented Mary from birth and may have even tried to harm her, including one incident where Mary was dropped from a window. During the trial, the public's focus wasn't just on Mary, but on her mother. Betty was seen as the source, the simple explanation for her daughter's incomprehensible violence. The case shows how, even when a child's actions might come from a place of deep trauma, the public often sees the parent not as a source of that trauma, but simply as the origin of evil. The courts in that era weren't well equipped to analyze the deep effects of childhood abuse on a child's behavior, and the public largely followed that lead. In 1999, the line between child's play and lethal violence blurred terrifyingly in the case of 12-year-old Lionel Tate. His mother, Kathleen Grossett Tate, was babysitting 6-year-old Tiffany Unick and left the two kids to play together. A short time later, Tiffany wasn't breathing. She had suffered catastrophic injuries, including a fractured skull and a lacerated liver. Lionel's defense argued it was a tragic accident, that he was just imitating the pro wrestling moves he loved to watch on TV. The jury didn't buy it. They convicted Lionel of first-degree murder and sentenced him to life in prison without parole. At the time, he was the youngest person in modern U.S. history to receive such a sentence, sparking a fierce national debate about juvenile justice. That sentence was eventually overturned on appeal, and he later accepted a plea deal, but the case left a haunting question. How could a child, who was seemingly just playing, cause such devastation? For Lionel's mother, the horror was doubled. The death of a little girl under her roof and the shocking realization of what her own son had done. It's a terrifying thought for any parent. The child you see every day can have a capacity for violence that remains completely hidden from view. It's a terrifying thought. The child you see every day could have a side you never knew existed. But what happens when a parent's instinct to protect their child actually makes them an accomplice? More recently, the 2021 murder of 13-year-old Tristan Bailey in Florida sent shockwaves across the country. The person responsible was 14-year-old Aiden Fucci, who stabbed her 114 times. Fucci pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received a life sentence. In this case, the scrutiny on his parents was immediate and intense. Fucci's mother, Crystal Smith, was arrested and charged with evidence tampering. A home surveillance camera caught her washing her son's blood-stained jeans. It was a gut-wrenching image of a mother's instinct to protect her child colliding head-on with a criminal investigation. At the sentencing, the judge pointed out the extreme brutality of the crime. He noted that while there seemed to be no motive, Fucci had made chilling statements to friends that he wanted to kill someone just to know what it felt like. The case became a modern-day example of the ultimate parental nightmare. The question, "What did you know?" became central. Did his parents see any of the warning signs? His mother's actions, whether driven by panic or a deliberate cover-up, cemented the public's view of her, a parent who failed, at every turn, to do the right thing. These cases are deeply disturbing, and they force us to confront uncomfortable questions. Where does a child's accountability end and a parent's begin? Let us know what you think in the comments. It's easy for us to sit back and think, "I would have seen the signs." We believe that if our child were heading down a dark path, the signals would be obvious. But the reality is almost always far more complicated. In fact, many parents of children who commit violent acts are described by others as attentive and loving. So why are the red flags so often missed? For one, some young people become masters of hiding their true selves. They learn to compartmentalize, showing a normal, even compliant face to their parents, while their darker thoughts are shared only with friends or online. Ethan Crumbley, for instance, told a school counselor his disturbing drawings were just ideas for a video game, successfully hiding his real intentions from the adults trying to help. Another reason is that many warning signs, on their own, don't scream danger. Adolescence is a turbulent time. Moodiness, social withdrawal, and rebellious acts can just be part of being a teenager. Parents might mistake a serious red flag for a passing phase, not because they're negligent, but because they have no frame of reference for what a genuine threat looks like. Finally, in homes where there's already dysfunction, a child's escalating aggression can start to feel normal over time. Behavior that might shock an outsider just becomes part of the family's daily stress, something to be managed, not confronted. Many parents only seek help when a crisis erupts and the school or the police get involved. And by then, it's often too late. The parents of a child who kills are thrown into a unique and lonely hell. They exist in a whirlwind of grief, guilt, public condemnation, and trauma. Many are socially exiled, shamed into silence by former friends, the media, and their own crushing self-blame. They aren't just mourning the victims and the lives destroyed, they are also mourning the child they raised, a person they may no longer recognize at all. Cases like the Crumbleys are pushing society toward a new era of parental accountability. But as we navigate these complex legal and ethical waters, we have to remember the human story behind the headlines. Blame is often a simple and satisfying story, but the path that leads a child to commit a horrific act rarely is. And for the parents left behind, they are often condemned to a life sentence of their own, forever known as the mother or father of a killer.